What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're taking a deep dive into draft strategy in redraft leagues from an early first round pick. We'll be using all of the draft strategy research we've done so far, and I'm going to show you 3 example teams that you could build using current ADPs under different starts in the first 2 rounds. Also, I will be assuming a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex format with half PPR scoring. For full PPR scoring, you're going to lean a little bit more towards wide receiver, especially in the early rounds. And in a 3 wide receiver format where you're also able to start 1 flex spot, meaning you can start 4 wide receivers if you want, you're leaning even heavier into wide receiver in the early rounds with running back, tight end, quarterback, all losing some value since they're making up a smaller percentage of your starting roster spots. But again, for this, we're assuming 2 starting wide receivers. So in round 1, and I'm saying for early first round picks here, we're talking picks 1 through 4. The top 3 is fairly locked in. You're basically choosing your favorite between Jefferson, Chase, and McCaffrey. I genuinely don't think there is a concrete locked in answer as to what is best 1 through 3. I do think Jefferson over Chase is what most people are going to land on. But if you want to take McCaffrey first, second, or third in that list, I don't think it really matters. It's up to what you prefer. But I think that top 3 is fairly locked in. At that last spot, number 4, you could argue for a number of different players, and I wouldn't fault you for taking any of them. My personal lean is to go with Austin Eckler if those top 3 are off the board. Historically, running back does grade out as just a better pick to make in round 1, all things being equal. But also it's better from a game theory perspective. By taking a running back, you're opening the door to hero RB builds. So if you happen to fall in love with wide receiver, tight end, quarterback over the next few rounds, which is definitely possible, there are some very good ones available, there's a clear drop-off at running back, well, then that's okay, right? Because you took that running back in round 1. If you skip on running back in round 1, you can still do hero RB. It's totally fine to do hero RB from a late second round pick, but it's certainly less ideal, right? When you do hero RB, you need that running back to have a true breakout season, or even just to be like a monster, right? Be a top 3 running back, have a season like Austin Eckler had last year, right? You kind of need that to happen if you're trying to win under that build. And that's just less likely with a late second round pick. A lot of the top end running backs are now off the board. So we would prefer hero RB with the running back in round 1. So by taking that running back in round 1, you open up that possibility. By taking wide receiver, you close that door just a little bit. It's just 1 extra out that you don't have. Now, having said that, as I said, the top 3 is still McCaffrey, Jefferson, Chase in some order. So I'm still not considering that and being like, oh, well, I can't do hero RB, so I might as well take Eckler over Jefferson. No, I think the top 3 is locked in. I'm more saying that to say I prefer Eckler over Kupp and Tyreek Hill because of the ability to start hero RB if I need to, again, in redraft leagues. So in our 3 teams, we're going to have 1 McCaffrey start, 1 Jefferson start, and then 1 that starts off with Austin Eckler from the 101, 102, and 104 respectively. In round 2, we're looking at picks between like 21 and 24, again, late second round. And some very common players that'll be on the board are likely all of the quarterbacks. Sometimes one goes, but likely all of the quarterbacks are still there. All of the non-Travis Kelce tight ends, Kelce will not be there. At wide receiver, you're going to be looking at like, Waddle, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave. At running back, you're probably looking at Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Ramondre Stevenson. In my opinion, this is a big spot to play the ADP game. You really want to make sure that you've got at least 1 running back and 1 wide receiver when you exit the 3rd round. I would not feel comfortable with 3 straight running backs or 3 straight wide receivers. Again, half PPR, 2 starting wide receivers. If it were full PPR, 3 starting wide receivers and a flex, I am confident taking 3 wide receivers to start off with. But in our example, I would want like 2 running backs and a receiver, 2 receivers, and running back. That's how I would prefer to exit the third round. I just wouldn't want all three. And so since that's the case, you're sitting there at that end of the second round spot. There's not that many picks that are going to go by between your next pick. If you took the 101, you get the double dip here. There's no ADP game to play. But if you're at, your 102, your 104 spots, a few picks will go by. And so you really want to just see what's on the board, right? If among the running backs I just listed, there's only one left, but let's say all four wide receivers are still on the board, the move is to take that running back, even if in the rankings they're a little bit behind, because you're ensuring, okay, I get that running back, and I'm pretty confident one of these wide receivers will still be there. If you take the wide receiver, you run the risk that that one running back comes off the board, and now you almost have to take that wide receiver. You just want to still open up chance for yourself. You want to open up options. You don't want to be like you're in round 3 and you already just like have to take something because nothing else is there. So again, just make sure you don't triple up at a position. If you want to go with quarterback at that round 3 spot right after the turn, I think it's totally fine. And I think many rankings, even my own rankings, might have them as like good picks there. My preference is to not do that with a top 4 pick. I think the quarterbacks, again, are perfectly fine, but you're definitely not getting like insane value. And so I would stick with running backs and wide receivers with, the first 3 picks when you have a top 4 pick in the draft. Again, like you're really only taking one quarterback, maybe you're taking 2 late. And so I would still, even though we want them early, I'd still treat it as a position to where it's like, I want to be pumped about it. I want to be very happy with like, wow, I can't believe I got this quarterback this late. Like, I think they're going to be incredible this season. I think this is phenomenal value. If you're just like, take the first one off the board, at like the 25th pick in the draft, you didn't get that insane of a value. You're not opening up the potential later in the draft. It's like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense just from like a strategy perspective. So I would prefer running backs and wide receivers at the spot. For our example, we're going to take Pollard and Olave on the team with McCaffrey. We're going to take Waddle and Stevenson on the team with Jefferson, and then Waddle and Olave on the team that started off with Eckler. So again, not tripling up on any of them. In the 4th round, it's another spot you're probably going with running back or wide receiver. This is the late 4th round. My lean would be to just even things out. So to leave round 4 with 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, you open up whatever potential you want over the next few rounds. If you wanted to abandon wide receiver, abandon running back because the value's in other spots, you can do it now that you're even at those 2. One exception is if you do want to go hero RB, if you took that running back in round 1, in our example, it's Austin Eckler. That is a build I'm going to show you is something you could do for hero RB. You love Austin Eckler. You think he's going to be, 15 to 17 touchdown running back with major upside in the receiving game. You're confident in him as the running back 1, and you love these other spots. Maybe you don't love running back there, which honestly, like I fall into that camp a lot. There's a lot of times I get into the 4th round and I'm like, you know what? We've seen the drop off at running back. I don't feel confident in any of these players, but I look at wide receiver and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I love all of these players. And so sometimes that can happen. Again, it's why we might lean when it's 50-50 running back in round 1. So if you want to do that, I think that's totally fine. If you're not comfortable doing hero RB, you kind of have to split. I again think quarterback is like fine to take in round 4, but it's going to depend on value. Oftentimes in competitive leagues, you're looking at that top 5 or 6 quarterbacks are already off the board once you get into the 4th round. And so if one of them's fallen, if you look at the draft board and you see, Burrow, Lamar, Fields, one of them is still there. They're great value by ADP. They're great value in the rankings. I have absolutely no problem in taking any of them. I'm just saying it's more likely that they are gone when you get to this turn pick at 4-5. And so I'm not going to put them on any of these teams. But again, I would be very confident in doing that. So I'm going to take Drake London on the example team that had McCaffrey, Pollard, and Olave. We're evening out those 2. I'm going to take Joe Mixon on the team that has Jefferson, Waddle, and Stevenson. Again, evening out the 2 positions. And then I'll go with Drake London on the team. We're going to have hero RB, Eckler, Waddle, Olave. And then again, this round is going to be London. In round 5, this is the early 5th round after that turn. It definitely depends on what you have done thus far. But my hope, honestly, is quarterback. This is a fantastic spot to grab a quarterback. If Hawkinson has fallen to this spot, I think that's totally fine. Remember, maybe one of those top 6 quarterbacks has fallen into the 5th round. You can grab one of them. But if not, I think Justin Herbert is also a fantastic quarterback to grab in this range. I am supremely confident in not only his talent, but the opportunity on this team. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, Gerald Everett, like they have playmakers everywhere. They're going to be very, very good offense, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of yards. I feel very confident taking him in the 5th round. But again, if one of the other quarterbacks had fallen, it's just a spot where I think quarterback is a really good pick. I still like, running backs and wide receivers, but I would say I see a bigger drop off, or at least a bigger potential drop off in quarterback talent. Remember, we're in the early 5th round. So we're going to see all the 5th round go by. Then we're going to see all of the 6th round go by, and we're going to be sitting there at the end of the 6th. And I think there's a better potential that when we get to that turn at 6, 7, that we can double dip at wide receiver, that we can take a running back and a wide receiver that we still feel very confident in, that really aren't too much different than the ones available at this spot. But at quarterback, I do think that's the case. I really do think that there's at least a chance, not in every draft, but there's a chance that we see a run at quarterback there, and we're looking at quarterback like, we missed it. We can still get some good ones, but we missed the really good ones. We're kind of probably going to have to be double dipping later on. So again, for this example team, I'm going to take Herbert on all 3. In the late 6th round, Hawkinson for sure gone. Again, he would have been fine in that 5th round pick, but he's not going to be there in round 6. I would say likely George Kittle is gone as well. So your top options at tight end are probably Pitts, Goddard, and Waller. At running back, you're most likely looking at maybe Madison. He'd be a great pick there if he was available. He's probably gone, but it's possible some people don't believe in his talent, and maybe he's there. But I would say it's more likely your choice is between Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, Rashawn White, James Conner, those 4 running backs. And then at wide receiver, you're looking at probably like Deontay, Ayuk, Lockett, Evans, Marquise Brown, and Treylon Burks. I would, again, play the ADP game at this 6-7 turn, but I also wouldn't really want to leave this round with 4 players at a position. So I would double dip at running back in this like hero RB build. I really wouldn't want to grab that 4th wide receiver to still only have 1 running back. You're definitely drafting a bench player before that 2nd running back spot. And on this team, it's also before your tight end spot. And so it's not ideal to do. If there's an incredible value, never shy away from that, right? Like if someone's, 2 rounds of value, you're sitting there like, how on earth is this player still available at this spot? Do it. Unless that's the case, optimally, you probably want to shy away from taking that 4th. And so I would most likely just lean towards, again, on the hero RB build, taking those 2 running backs and then taking like 1 running back, 1 wide receiver on the other 2. Not wanting 4 is for like both. I wouldn't want 4 running backs. I wouldn't want 4 wide receivers. And it really comes down to your personal preference, like which ones you're taking in this range. I know some of you love Miles Sanders, hate Cam Akers. Some of you love Cam Akers and hate Miles Sanders. I wouldn't focus too much on the exact player I'm taking in these example builds and more just like the positions that we're doing. Again, our goal after round 7 is to either have 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and then 1 of tight end or quarterback. And if not, I would only want 3 of 1 of running back or wide receivers, and then to have filled both quarterback and tight end. As I said at the beginning, this does change in a full PPR league, changes in leagues where you can start 3 wide receivers and have that flex spot. So again, we're assuming 2 wide receivers. In this one, just expand it by 1 if you can start an extra wide receiver. Then for the rest of your draft, you're really just ideally building your team very evenly. I feel like I don't talk about this part a lot, but you really want to be like alternating positions, right? It goes back to not locking yourself in a box. You definitely don't want to do that early, but it still applies in the mid to late rounds. Like if you draft, let's say, 4 straight wide receivers, then it can absolutely work out and you can get some awesome builds if you just attack the wide receiver position in rounds like 6, 7, 8, 9. Like you just start hammering them out. And then you look at running back after that, and maybe you do hit on some really, really good values in those rounds. But what could also happen is that you might be sitting in round 12 with all of the wide receivers that you wanted to draft for the entire draft, like the number you wanted, whether that's like 6, 7, depends on your bench size, how many you're going to do. But if you've got maybe you're like your 7 wide receivers, and you're like, okay, I'm not drafting anymore. But then you look at running back and you were expecting to see a lot better value, and it's a position you now need to fill. But what if you don't like them? What if you hate all of them and you look at wide receiver and you're like, oh, I wish I kind of, took a running back a little earlier because there's still some wide receivers I like and I don't like the running back position. But by building evenly, you're allowing yourself to like sometimes stray away, sometimes take 2, maybe 3 in a row. But as long as you're even further and further into the draft at 3 running backs, 3 receivers, 4 running backs, 4 receivers, like you're consistently building evenly, you're going to give yourself the flexibility to take the best value possible in more rounds. But if you go too heavy into running back or wide receiver, then you might not have that luxury in the later rounds, which is going to hurt you in the long run. So having said all of that, these are the teams you could end up with again, a 1st, 2nd, or 4th overall pick. The 101 team has Justin Herbert at quarterback, McCaffrey, Eckler, Kamara, and A-Chain at running back, Olave, London, Ayuk, Elijah Moore, Flowers at wide receiver, and then Kyle Pitts at tight end. Under that build, I would not personally take a backup quarterback or tight end. I would really just split those final rounds between running back and wide receiver. If you don't feel amazing about Kyle Pitts and you want that backup, well, maybe you just don't draft Kyle Pitts. If you really think Pitts was a good pick at that spot, you invested a relatively early, not super early, but a relatively early pick at that position, you're better off just not taking that tight end late. You can find one in free agency if Kyle Pitts happens to be a bust. I would reserve for these other 2 teams we're going to talk about when you double dip at tight end. It's because you invested a lot less draft capital in that first one, and you're really using it to say, listen, it's hard to hit late on tight end, and so give yourself 2 opportunities. But you gave yourself a pretty good opportunity taking Pitts early, and so I wouldn't take that backup, and I would not take a backup if you took someone in the 5th round like we did here on all 3 teams. I would not take a backup to Herbert. The 102 team has Herbert, like we said, he's on all 3. Then at running back, Stevenson, Mixon, Montgomery, and Kamara. At wide receiver, Jefferson, Waddle, Ayuk, Elijah Moore, and Flowers. And then Chigakonkwo at tight end. Again, if I took Chig that late, I would take a backup tight end. And then finally, 4th overall pick, Herbert at quarterback. This is the Hero RB build. So we had Eckler, Miles Sanders, Montgomery, and Kamara. And then we've got Waddle, Olave, London, Elijah Moore, Flowers at wide receiver. And again, Chigakonkwo at tight end. And again, for that one, treat the final rounds in the same way. Grab a backup tight end, alternate running back and wide receiver for however many rounds you have in your league. So that is how I would look to attack a draft from an early 1st round pick, along with 3 example teams, depending on, just how the first 2 rounds go. I want to reiterate that these are just more general tips to follow and not like strict rules. Our goal is to have 2 running backs in the first 5 rounds and to target, early mid-round quarterbacks, tight ends, to not completely abandon running back or wide receiver at any point. But I understand that things happen, right? You can't take everyone in the early rounds. And so if we're taking quarterback, we're taking tight end early, we're getting 2 running backs in the first 5 rounds, you are, to some degree, abandoning wide receiver just a little bit. I just wouldn't go too heavy into anything. Don't leave the 8th round with 1 wide receiver and wonder why you don't have amazing wide receivers in that season. I would try your best to build evenly, but follow the general rules we've kind of been talking about. I really like that mid-round range for quarterbacks. I think a lot of them have really significant upside. The tight ends I would be willing to invest early mid-round picks are Hawkinson, Mark Andrews, Pitts, Waller. Those are the general players we're attacking, and you're filling in running back and wide receiver in all these other rounds. Again, leaning running back early, but if we're an early 1st round pick, Jefferson and Chase are really good, and then taking them is going to set up what you do in all of the other rounds. So please, please, please do mock drafts, right? Take the advice from this video, go in, do some mock drafts from exactly where you're going to be drafting, and just see what type of builds you end up with, see what kind of players you're deciding between. I kind of talked about some of the players here, but there are many rounds in the draft. See what happens when you're doing your mock drafts, and make sure you have a set of rankings that you can fall back on that you trust, right? Because that is still the core of your draft is, well, okay, I want wide receiver, but which wide receiver should I be drafting at this spot? My rankings are updated, sometimes several times per day, but they're always up to date for the latest news. And they even take draft strategy into account. I've built that into the rankings, all the things we talk about in these videos. I also now have a drafting app that you can input positions that you have drafted into the app, and it'll tell you, okay, well, given that you've started off running back, here are the best positions in order for what you should draft in the next round. So if you want to check out either one of those, you can find that at my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. I'll be back tomorrow to go over a player breakdown video, Friday to talk about my models predictions for some breakout running backs, and then Saturday to look at the biggest ADP changes over the last 2 weeks. That, my friends, is this one. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting the like button and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.